marathon runner and a chief motivational officer at Weightless. When not presenting at health seminars in Minneapolis, you can find her online at www.weightlesschronicles.com. She holds a master's degree in leadership from Augsburg and is a former certified fraud examiner. So you wish you had more willpower, but you feel like you are just weak-willed. The good news is willpower is a muscle you can train. Learn how willpower actually works and how to flex it like a bodybuilding champ. What the marshmallow study or willpower tells us, why we have been led to believe that willpower can be used up, and strategies to strengthen and flex your willpower in situations you have always succumbed to before. Please welcome Jennifer Espinosa-Goswami. The title of her presentation is Flexing Your Willpower Like a Pro.
Thank you, Sarah. Just a question, may I use my slides? You just have to promote me to a host.
Yes, I think I do that. Jen, let me do a share screen.
Sure.
Let me go ahead. Jen, I make you as host? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to make you as host. Do you want to change the host to Jen? Yes, let's go ahead and change you to host. There we go.
Perfect. Now I'm going to share my screen, and it'll just take a moment for me to get that going so you can see my slides. Can everyone see the slide called Flexing Your Willpower?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, well, let's get started, everyone. So this is intended to be a virtual presentation, which is why I would like to share my slides. Gives you more visual interest. You've already heard from my bio today who I am, but some things you may not have known about me is I was a morbidly obese kid. There's my before picture when I was about 18 or 19 years old. I found the strength and willpower, if you will, to lose 100 pounds over 20 years ago. I did it entirely on my own with no support or products or anything of that nature. I'm also the proud mom of two beautiful girls, and I've been on a variety of outlets, in international, national media. Very lucky to have had those opportunities. So enough about me. Let's talk about what we'll be covering. And by the way, during the course of this presentation, because it is intended to be interactive, I highly encourage you all to weigh in on the chat or weigh in with your particular comments, because I will be asking you to participate. So is everyone okay with that? All right, I'm trying to change this so I can actually see the chat. Here we go, maybe that'll work. Okay, cool. So what we are going to be learning over the next 15 to 20 minutes or so is, what do three separate and very distinct studies, scientific studies, tell us about the nature of willpower? And what does willpower actually get used up? There are a number of articles out there and mythology around how willpower is used and how we obtain it. So we'll clarify some of those things as well. And finally, I'll walk you through some very specific strategies to strengthen your willpower. It is possible. We'll go over what that looks like for all of you. So first of all, I just want to get your input and see where you currently sit when it comes to willpower. Are you of the belief system that willpower is a muscle that you can strengthen, or do you believe that it is a cup from which we draw limited reserves? Once the cup is empty, it's empty and we have no more. You can weigh in on the chat, or you can even unmute yourself if you'd like to share your opinions.
I think we can strengthen our willpower. It's a muscle.
It's a muscle. And it sounds like a couple other people are sharing in the chat that they do feel we can strengthen it. It is a muscle we can strengthen. I'm glad to hear that. Now we'll dive into the studies from the science and the research to see what actually has been found. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Okay, so let's go to the definition of willpower, because it's important to start with the same definition. I'm going to just move my screen here a little bit. Here we go. Okay, so willpower is the ability to resist short-term temptations in order to meet long-term goals. Some synonyms you may hear for willpower will be self-discipline. Some people use the word self-control. Basically, it's how you monitor yourself and your ability to monitor. There are plenty of temptations out there. So we'll talk about some of those different temptations around the focus of health. Can you all still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my internet was going a little off. Okay, so let's stop, sorry. When it comes to diets and health, because that's one thing that I assist my clients with, is how to eat healthier. We see a lot of information out there, that books, articles, gurus, self-help coaches, all those people who say, don't eat this, eat that. There's also a grocery list that you can download for free on all the social media sites saying, here are some approved foods you can eat from, and here are foods that are evil, bad, give you cancer, toxic, poison, whatever words you want to use to indicate food that are not good for you. And then you also hear those other studies. Some of them are very small sample sizes, but you might hear that fat is bad for you. I'm a child of the low-fat diet craze back in the 80s and 90s, so I'm very familiar with the eat less fat. Low fat is the way to go. Today, we're swinging more towards the low sugar, sugar-free kind of lifestyle, where they're saying sugar will give you cancer. Very scary thing to hear, right? I mean, we don't want to get cancer. Anything we can do to weigh the odds in our favor, we will do it. And then there's all sorts of information around carbs for those who are embracing a keto or low carb lifestyle. We hear about ingredients you can pronounce. So don't eat anything you can't pronounce or your grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. There are a lot of cautions out there. So does that mean that we have to be strong and have willpower in order to succeed at these diets? Well, let's take a look at what the research is telling us. The most popular study that came out in regards to willpower was the marshmallow study. So raise your hand or let me know in the chat if you have heard of the marshmallow study. I have a few hands raised. I have a few shaking of heads. Okay, looks like about 50% of us are aware of it at least, but I'll walk you through what the study involved. So it was back in the 70s. It was led by the great psychologist Walter Mischel. He's a professor at Stanford University. And he set up this study with preschool age children, as you see from the marshmallow picture in the corner. Young kids, you know, who are tempted by marshmallows. Marshmallows are soft and sweet and delicious, so what kid could resist that? Well, he set up the study in such a way to see if these kids can sit in a room with a marshmallow right in front of them, a single marshmallow. And we're told if they waited for 15 minutes without eating that marshmallow that was staring right at them, that he would come back into the room and give them a second marshmallow. So they will double their chances of eating a delicious marshmallow if they can just wait for 15 minutes and not munch on that marshmallow. And interestingly enough, what was found from the results of this study was the kids who were able to sit there 15 minutes without eating that single marshmallow ended up having, throughout the next 5 or 6 years of their life, because the study went back and examined where they were in their lives as adolescents, from preschool to adolescence. They had better life outcomes. What are those outcomes? They had better scores on tests, you know, standardized tests that you get in elementary school. The ones who were followed for longer had better work success. That could be anything from their position to how effective they were at work, and even better health, just by the sheer power of their willpower and ability to delay that gratification. Some other results in terms of health: these children had lower BMI, which is body mass index. That's not necessarily the best way to measure your health, but it's one of the measures we have today. Higher SAT scores, even years and years beyond this small study in the 1970s. He also, the person who developed this study, Mischel, also authored a book called The Marshmallow Study, which talks all about how you master self-control. So according to what we know from this study back in the 70s, people who are able to delay their gratification and exert stronger willpower at young ages are more likely to be successful as they grow up. So that would make you believe that you just have to be strong. You have so much willpower to draw upon as a child And if you do good then, you're going to keep doing good throughout life, right? How do we apply this to a health sense? Because when it comes to diets, diets are difficult. Eating healthier is difficult. Enjoying the taste of things like kale and broccoli as opposed to marshmallows is difficult. We can all admit to that. Further complicating the issue of delayed gratification is understanding the difference between hunger and cravings. Now, some of you may be familiar with these terms, but I'll walk through them anyway for those who aren't. So in terms of hunger, we have a hormone called ghrelin, and I might be pronouncing that slightly different. It's a hard word to pronounce, but that's basically a hormone that's produced in our guts that triggers our appetite. That triggers our hunger complex. Some people who don't have higher levels of ghrelin in their blood actually have an easier time utilizing willpower and resisting temptation. So that is a genetic thing. It can also be influenced by how we eat. Now, cravings are different than hunger. So food cravings are usually caused by regions in our brain. So not our gut, it's in our brain. And those regions are responsible for our memory, our pleasure, and our rewards, how we experience rewards from a physiological standpoint. Knowing that hunger and cravings are two separate things, but both may play into how we delay our short-term rewards is really important when we're talking about willpower, because there are a number of factors coming here, not just physical, but also psychological. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we can weaken our willpower? Are there other things that can weaken our ability to stay strong in the face of temptation? In the 1990s, there was a further study. It was conducted at Case Western Reserve University by a man named Roy Baumeister. He was one of many researchers looking at this. But they did what was, it doesn't have a formal title, but they used radishes and chocolate chip cookies to test another group of hapless children. And instead of a marshmallow, we're moving to chocolate chip cookies. We're upping the ante a little bit. And what they did was they had two different plates in the room with their test subjects. And on one plate was sliced radishes. On another plate was chocolate chip cookies. Both plates were there. And the children were told that they could eat from one plate, only one plate. And then they were taken to another room where they had to work on a puzzle. Now, the really sad part about this is that puzzle was impossible to solve. And it was designed to be impossible to solve because they wanted to see if the children's willpower was depleted by choosing the healthier radish to the extent that they did not have the mental capacity to solve this impossible puzzle. So how long do you think the people who chose to eat the chocolate chip cookies, how long do you think they lasted at trying to solve this impossible puzzle? You can speak out loud or put it in the chat. What do you think? How many minutes did they last?
I'll guess 10 minutes.
10 minutes, we got 5. We got a few other people weighing in there. No, they actually lasted 19 minutes, which ended up being 11 minutes longer than the people who chose the healthier radish. So you would come to think from this interesting study, which I don't want any of us to participate in because it sounds like torture, but when you make the healthy right choice, but might go against your temptation to eat those chocolate chip cookies, it actually weakens your ability to solve hard questions. It might affect your ability to make important decisions in other areas of your life. And this is what the study had found. Roy Baumeister is pretty much a leading voice in this industry. He wrote a book called Willpower, Rediscovering the Greatest Human Strength. He also has his own website, which I linked out here. You're welcome. I can put it in the chat later as well if you'd like resource slides from this. And he has 30 different published books and works doing this research. So he has done a significant amount of research on the ability of willpower to be weakened by decisions that you make. Basically, his ideas boil down to the idea of ego depletion. So ego depletion refers to the idea that self-control or willpower draws upon a limited pool of mental resources that can be used up. So this is the cup. Like once you draw all that willpower from the cup, you have nothing left to draw upon. That's what ego depletion is talking about. And ego doesn't mean your sense of self, it's the psychological sense, like how you're able to withstand temptation, how you move in this world. That's what ego depletion stands for. So again, taking this to a health lens, what does this mean for health and dieting and healthy eating? Well, Brian Wansink, who is one of my favorite researchers, he founded the Cornell Research Lab on marketing, food marketing. And he said that consumers like us, you and I, make up to 200 food decisions every day. So if you go by the theory from Roy Baumeister that every time you make a decision, you are using up those depleted resources of willpower, then we're not looking so good right now, right? That's why it's so hard to stay healthy. That's why it's so hard to continue making those decisions. If you're making over 200 decisions just about food, that doesn't even count all the other decisions we make on a regular basis. And going further into the types of messages and images we're being consumed and inundated by, children in particular, a lot of research is done on children, not specifically adults, but children consume 45% more snacks when they're exposed to food advertising while they're watching TV. Now, I don't know about you, my children tend to watch a lot of TV, and the average American watches between 3 and 6 hours of television every day. So not only is our willpower being depleted, but we're being exposed to more and more messages and more temptations in front of us just by living life and watching TV more. And every day on average, children are viewing 15 TV food ads a day, and many of those ads are not telling you to eat apples and carrots. They're telling you to eat Twinkies and Gatorade and all these things that may not be the healthiest thing for us as individuals. So there is some support behind this idea that we are just getting tired of making these decisions. And no wonder it's not a matter of willpower in terms of how you reach your goals. Maybe it's not about willpower. So again, we get to the idea, is willpower a muscle, according to this research that we've already heard about, or is it something you can strengthen? Let's get back to that idea. Further complicating the studies, another study came out, this time more current, about 10 years ago, 2010. Veronica Job, who currently is studying in Germany, she does a lot of research with Carol Dweck. If you're not familiar with Carol Dweck, she is the one who wrote the book on intrinsic motivation, especially as it applies to educational settings. But Veronica worked with Carol, and they came up with this idea of our own belief system around willpower influences whether we have more willpower. Can you imagine? So those of you who said yes in the beginning and said, yes, it is a muscle, we can strengthen it, that means you're more likely to intrinsically have higher amounts of willpower than someone who does not believe that we have unlimited reserves of willpower. So your own belief system can make you have more willpower than someone who thinks that it's something you use up and then you're done with it and it's over. Very interesting studies. Veronica Job contributed to the book called Mind Over Matter, because it's all about how your mindset influences your ability to avoid short-term temptations. And she wrote a lot of theories around ego depletion, again, the limited reserves of willpower, theories of willpower, and self-control, because willpower is also known as self-discipline or self-control. So again, we have this added layer of it depends on what you think. It depends on what you believe in terms of your willpower. So how do we get stronger? Because I think that's something that I know I want to learn more about. How do I get stronger when it comes to willpower? Here is how to think of willpower, just as you would think about it as a muscle. We know how muscles get built. There are millions of books around it and lots of personal trainers who will tell you how to train your muscles. Well, we can use the same philosophy to train our willpower. And what does that look like? First, you flex it regularly in progressive periods of time. What does that mean? Well, when you think about lifting weights, you lift until your muscles fail. By fail, I mean you can't lift it anymore. The lactic acid is building up in your muscle, you're tired, and you feel like dropping the weight. Use the same philosophy when it comes to your willpower. You flex and utilize it regularly enough that you can't do it anymore. You got to make it feel weak. And then you let it rest and recover. Because while if you do believe in your own willpower, it will be stronger. We can still have periods of time where we are tired of making those decisions, where we need to rest and recover, and we need to give that muscle of our willpower a chance to grow and strengthen. So this is the philosophy. How do we put this into practice? Just a small little thing to put it out there. One thing I do is I assist clients with this all the time. I help them design 90-day plans. 90 days are superior to 30 days because it's all about building the habit and growing strength over time. So this is a training that I'm letting you know is available to you if you're interested. It follows the same process I use to help clients master their willpower time and time again. Includes a full 90-minute training plus worksheets to help you get started. But let's talk about how to strengthen the willpower more strategically, because it can be done. These are just a few suggestions, and if you'd like to talk further about this, feel free to reach out to me or after this presentation. So first of all, if you don't use willpower, you're not using it up. Here's what I mean. Instead of saying, well, tomorrow I'm going to cut out all sugar from my diet, 0 sugar. That is a gargantuan effort that will use up all of your willpower, because if you're used to eating sugar, it is difficult to exert that control every time you make a food decision. However, if you say, well, for breakfast, I'm not going to have any sugar. How does that feel to you when you say, for one meal, I am not going to do this, as opposed to, I'm never, ever, ever, ever again going to do this? Does it feel easier? Does it feel manageable for you? That is what a small and nothing habit means. It's a very small shift in how you go about doing your daily business. And that's how you build up willpower, because you're practicing it, and you're allowing it to strengthen before you go for the big guns. Another thing you can do is to eat well. Obviously, if you struggle with healthy eating, this may be a tough place to start. However, if you're hungry, if you're tired, if you are making so many decisions that you are overwhelmed and exhausted, then hunger is not your friend, and it'll make your willpower weak just by default. So even if there's one meal or one snack you can incorporate, it's about adding and not subtracting, into your day, you are therefore strengthening your ability to exert that willpower for the next time you sit down to eat. Does that make sense? Awesome. Another tactic you can use is to assign rewards. Now, this is something I celebrate with my clients all the time. We celebrate their successes, what we call milestones. So not necessarily their ultimate, once I get here, life is amazing for me and I never have to set another goal for myself. Not necessarily, but those little milestones, those little small nothing habits, assign a reward for those. So for example, if you say, well, tomorrow I'm not eating any sugar at all for breakfast. It's going to be pure protein, healthy fats, some salad greens, whatever. And you get through tomorrow morning and you fulfill that, then give yourself a little reward. It could be anything, but it has to be meaningful to you. Maybe that reward is you give yourself 20 minutes to just do your favorite hobby with no distractions. Assign yourself rewards and make that a special moment for yourself, because the more you have a reward attached to your habit, the more likely you're going to continue to do that habit. And that also strengthens your willpower, because if it's something you don't want to do, but there's a reward at the end of you doing that, you're more likely to do it. It's all about your intrinsic motivation. The next strategy can be difficult, especially with COVID and the uncertainty in our life today, is to find your calm. There are many ways you can do this: meditation, journaling, a nice bath at night, whatever helps you feel calm, rested, and clear. The more overwhelmed we are, the harder it is to make a decision and the harder it is to strengthen our willpower. So finding a place of calm for yourself, no matter what that looks like, will allow your willpower to flex and grow in ways you never thought possible. And finally, a lot of people set these goals and that's what they're focused on, right? Is the end result. Once I reach that end result, then I will be happy. Instead, if you shift it to focusing on the process, you have no control over the results in your life. You have some control, but you cannot control for genetic factors. You cannot control for accidents or things that happen unexpectedly. You can absolutely control the process by which you act in the world. So for example, if you say, well, I'm not going to eat sugar for breakfast at all tomorrow, then you follow a process that it makes it easier for you to do that. Maybe you clean out your fridge of everything that has sugar. Get rid of that yogurt that's filled with sucralose. Get rid of those things that are not going to help you reach that goal, and clear that environment for yourself. That is your process. You're setting yourself up for success by making your environment allow you to do what you settled on doing. So you can be very clear about your process, and you can 100% get and attain your process. And then the results will come. But if you focus just on the results, you may have disappointment and you may give up because your willpower is just not strong enough to carry you through that decision. The less decisions you make in your environment, the better. In fact, the studies that showed from the marshmallow study was people who are less tempted by those short-term rewards were people who didn't see it as a temptation. They naturally love eating healthy. They naturally love exercising. So that marshmallow was not quite as appealing to them because that's just not something that was a priority for them. They focused on the process. Their process was avoid marshmallow, get second marshmallow. And it worked for them. Does anyone else have anything they would add in terms of willpower strategies to really strengthen their willpower? You can speak out loud or in the chat again.
I missed how you talked about eat well, hunger is not your willpower's friend.
How? So your question is how that helps you?
Yes. How do you not, if you're trying to let go of weight, you're hungry?
That's a great question, and one I'm very passionate about. So my strategy in terms of hunger, diets and hunger are not synonym necessarily. A diet is just how you eat. And hunger should not be a part of how you eat, no matter what your lifestyle looks like. So if you are in a place where you're eating healthy, but you're still hungry, then there's definitely some room for adjustments there. What works for me and works for my clients is building their meals around macronutrients, which are the building blocks of all food: protein, fat, and carbs. That's how our body processes food. There are also micronutrients like vitamins and minerals. We won't get into that. But your body primarily processes food as a protein, fat, or carb. If you're eating each of those three macronutrients every time you sit down to eat, I guarantee you'll be full every time you sit down to eat, even if it's fewer calories than you're eating today. Does that help answer your question?
I have a thought to share.
Sure.
A while back, I read a book which I very much enjoy. It was called, I think it was called Strengths 2.0 or something of that nature, which the whole point to it was that sometimes our lives are actually end up better if we spend most of our focus on the things we do well and finding ways to do more of those, rather than the things we don't do so well and we wish we could fix. And I wonder if that might actually be a strategy in this case. That I remember when I was growing up as a little kid, it was always hard for my mother to get me to come to dinner because I was involved in doing something else that was more important than dinner. So all those other things in life other than food that also give us joy, maybe dedicating more energy to that might actually be part of a decent strategy.
Absolutely, Jim, and thank you for sharing that. I think it was part of StrengthsFinder and Strengths 2.0 that brings that concept up, and that ties in well to the assigned rewards. For you as a child, a reward was perhaps these other activities that you really wanted to participate in and gave you joy. So that's part of your reward system, and if you tie that to a habit that didn't necessarily get tied to that, you might be more motivated and incentivized to improve habits. So it's a two-pronged approach. You're enjoying more of what you love, but you're also improving those things that you don't love as much. Does that help? Thank you, Jim. All right, so just to recap what we've talked about today, there are 3 different studies. We talked about the marshmallow test, ego depletion from Roy Baumeister, and then Veronica Job, who contributed to Mind Over Matter. These are all books that are available on Amazon. I encourage you, if you're looking for some reading material, to check out one of these or all 3 of these when you get a chance. And also I mentioned I help clients strategize their best roadmap to their healthiest self. And sometimes that includes these techniques of how to strengthen your willpower. If you're interested in that, it's only $19 for that training. Let me know if you're interested. Otherwise, I appreciate your time today. And I encourage you to get out there and find just one technique you can use to strengthen and flex your willpower like a champion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.